Mom called me trash at Christmas, all because I became more successful than my golden brother and expected me to just laugh. I didn't laugh. I didn't yell. I just packed my bags in complete silence. Dad said, "You're overreacting." My mom said, "Goodbye." I said nothing. Some things don't need words. They need action. Now they're begging. Hey, Reddit. So my mom called me trash at Christmas dinner in front of 18 family members. Not in a joking way. Not in a playful roast way. She looked me dead in the eyes and called me the family disappointment, the trash who got lucky, while my golden child brother sat there smirking like he just won a prize. She expected me to laugh it off like I always did. Take the hit. Smile through it. Keep the peace. But something snapped in me that night, and for the first time in 31 years, I chose myself. Let me back up a bit because this story needs context. I'm Nathan, 31 years old, and I'm the oldest of two sons. My younger brother Brandon is 28, and from the moment he was born, that kid became the center of my parents' entire universe. I'm not being dramatic here. This isn't some sibling rivalry nonsense where I'm bitter because he got a bigger piece of cake at a birthday party once. This is decades of systematic favoritism that would make a documentary filmmaker weep. Growing up in our house in Ohio was like living in two different realities. There was Brandon's reality, where he was praised for breathing, celebrated for existing, and coddled through every single failure like he was some fragile piece of art. Then there was my reality, where nothing I did was ever good enough, every achievement was minimized, and I was basically treated like the family utility player who existed to make Brandon look better. When I was 16, I worked part-time at a grocery store to save money for a used car. Took me 18 months of stocking shelves and dealing with entitled customers to save up $3,000. My parents contributed exactly zero. They said it would build character. You know what they did when Brandon turned 16? They bought him a brand new Mustang. Cash. No questions asked. When I pointed out the obvious unfairness, my mom literally said the words that still ring in my ears today. She said Brandon was different. Brandon needed more support. Brandon was special. Special. That word haunted me through my entire childhood. Every time I accomplished something, it was expected. Every time Brandon accomplished anything, it was a miracle worth celebrating. I graduated high school with a 3.9 GPA while working 25 hours a week. Brandon barely graduated with a 2.1 after being tutored by 3 different teachers my parents paid for privately. Guess who got the graduation party with 50 guests and catered food? Hint, it wasn't me. I got myself through college on scholarships and work-study programs. I studied finance because I was good with numbers, and I wanted stability, something my family never gave me. I graduated with honors in 4 years, while working nearly full-time. Brandon dropped out after 3 semesters because college wasn't for him. My parents paid off his $28,000 in student loans anyway. They said he needed a fresh start. Meanwhile, I'm over here drowning in student debt because apparently I was supposed to figure everything out on my own. Character building and all that. When I asked my parents if they could help with even a portion of my loans the same way they helped Brandon, my mom actually laughed. She said I was perfectly capable of handling it on my own. She said Brandon needed more help because life was harder for him. Harder. For the kid who never worked a job, never struggled academically without paid tutors, and never had to worry about whether he could afford textbooks. The double standard was so blatant it would be funny if it wasn't my actual life. I remember one Thanksgiving during my junior year when I came home stressed about finals and my part-time job schedule. I mentioned that I was working extra shifts to cover rent, and my mom looked at me like I had said something offensive. She told me I should focus more on family and less on money. This was the same woman who had just written Brandon a check for $2,000 because he wanted to take a road trip with his friends. The same woman who never once asked me how I was managing financially or if I needed anything. After college, I moved to Arizona for a job opportunity. Entry-level analyst position at an investment firm. Nothing glamorous. Definitely not impressive to my family who thought I was wasting my potential by not staying close to home like Brandon did. For years, I grinded. I'm talking 12-hour days, weekend work, constantly proving myself. I climbed the ladder the hard way because nobody handed me anything. Ever. Brandon bounced around through a series of jobs during this time. Retail, restaurant work, a brief stint as a personal trainer that lasted maybe 4 months. My parents subsidized his rent every single month. They bought his groceries. They co-signed his apartment when his credit was too garbage for him to qualify a loan. They even bought him a new car when the Mustang finally gave out after years of neglect. But here's where things started to shift. By 29, I had worked my way up to senior portfolio manager. I was handling accounts worth millions. I was making more money than both my parents combined. And suddenly, the family dynamic started getting weird. My mom would make these little comments whenever I visited. Things like asking if I really needed such a nice apartment, or questioning whether my job was stable enough, or suggesting that maybe I was working too hard and should slow down like Brandon, who had found peace in simplicity. Peace in simplicity. That's what she called her grown son living off their retirement savings while delivering food part-time and playing video games 16 hours a day. Brandon never said anything directly, but I could feel the resentment radiating off him every time I came home. The way he'd go quiet when I talked about work. The eye rolls when I mentioned anything about my life in Arizona. The comments about how some people just get lucky, while others have to struggle. Coming from the guy who had everything handed to him his entire life. The audacity was almost impressive. I tried to keep the peace for years. I really did. I sent money home when my parents complained about expenses. I bought Brandon birthday gifts he never acknowledged. I flew home for every major holiday, even though it meant using vacation days I could have spent actually relaxing. I did everything a good son and brother was supposed to do, and none of it mattered, because in their eyes, I would always be the difficult one who left, the cold one who chose career over family, the one who needed to be knocked down a few pegs. Which brings us to last Christmas, the Christmas that changed everything. My company had just closed a major deal that I led. We're talking the biggest acquisition in the firm's history. My bonus alone was more than my dad made in 2 years. I wasn't going to brag about it because that's not who I am, but I was proud. For the first time in my life, I felt like I had actually made it. Like all those years of sacrifice and grinding had finally paid off. I flew home for Christmas with actual hope in my heart. Stupid, I know. But I thought maybe this year would be different. Maybe they would finally see me. Maybe they would finally acknowledge that their oldest son had built something real. My parents had invited the whole extended family. Aunts, uncles, cousins, grandparents. 18 people crammed into their modest house for Christmas dinner. The house was decorated like a holiday catalog, and my mom had been cooking for 3 days straight. Everything looked perfect from the outside. Brandon was there, of course, holding court in the living room like he always did. He had a new girlfriend named Ashley who seemed nice enough. She was a dental hygienist who clearly had no idea what she was getting into with my family. Brandon was telling some story about his new job opportunity that turned out to be an MLM he had just joined. My parents were nodding along like he had just announced he cured cancer. When I walked in, the reception was lukewarm at best. A few quick hugs, some obligatory questions about my flight. Then everyone went back to focusing on Brandon and Ashley and the amazing business opportunity that was definitely not a pyramid scheme. I found myself standing alone by the appetizer table within 10 minutes of arriving. Classic. Dinner started around 6. My mom had outdone herself with the spread. Turkey, ham, all the sides, multiple desserts. We all squeezed around the extended dining table that barely fit in the room. I ended up wedged between my Aunt Carol and my cousin's husband, who I had met maybe twice. The seating arrangement felt intentional. Brandon was positioned at the center of the table, right between my parents, like a throne had been reserved for him. Ashley sat next to him looking impressed by everything, probably because she didn't know any better yet. The conversation flowed the way it always did at these things. Catching up, asking about kids, complaining about weather and politics and gas prices. Brandon dominated most of the discussion, talking about his new business venture like he was already a millionaire. My dad kept nodding enthusiastically, throwing in comments about how Brandon had finally found his calling. My mom beamed at him like he was announcing a Nobel Prize rather than an obvious pyramid scheme. Nobody asked me much of anything. Par for the course. I mostly listened and ate, which was fine. I had stopped expecting attention at family gatherings years ago. You learn to make yourself small when you grow up being treated as an afterthought. Then my grandmother, bless her heart, decided to bring me into the conversation. She asked how work was going. Simple question. Innocent enough. I gave a modest answer about how things were going well, how we had a good year, how I was grateful for the opportunities I had. I wasn't bragging. I wasn't showing off. I was just answering a direct question from my 82-year-old grandmother, who genuinely wanted to know about my life. That's when my mom decided to interject. She laughed this cold, performative laugh and said something that made the entire table go silent. She said it was funny how the family trash ended up pretending to be successful. She said I must have fooled a lot of people to get where I was, because it certainly wasn't talent or hard work. She said Brandon was the one with real potential, and I just got lucky because I was willing to abandon my family for money. 18 people. 18 people heard my mother call me trash, call me a fraud, dismiss everything I had accomplished as luck and deception. My grandmother looked mortified. A few of my cousins shifted uncomfortably in their seats. My dad stared at his plate like it was the most interesting thing in the world. And Brandon? Brandon smirked. That little smirk that said he had won. That said no matter what I accomplished, I would always be beneath him in our mother's eyes. For a moment, I felt that familiar urge to smooth things over, to laugh it off, to make a self-deprecating joke that would diffuse the tension and let everyone pretend nothing happened. That's what I had done my entire life. Take the hit, keep the peace, protect everyone else's comfort at the expense of my own dignity. But something was different this time. Maybe it was the years of accumulated disrespect. Maybe it was the fact that I had just accomplished something genuinely significant and it still wasn't enough. Maybe it was seeing that smirk on Brandon's face one too many times. Whatever it was, something in me went cold. Not angry, not sad, just cold. Like a switch flipped and suddenly I could see everything clearly for the first time. I didn't say anything. I just set down my fork, stood up from the table, and walked upstairs to the guest room where my bag was. I could hear the confused murmurs starting below me. My mom calling out, asking where I was going, her voice already shifting to that defensive tone she used when she knew she had crossed a line but wasn't willing to admit it. I packed my bag methodically. Clothes, toiletries, the book I had brought for the flight, chargers. Everything went back into the suitcase with calm, deliberate movements. No rushing, no dramatic gestures, just a man collecting his belongings. By the time I came back downstairs with my bag, half the table had gotten up. My dad intercepted me in the hallway, his face a mixture of embarrassment and frustration. He told me I was overreacting. He said my mom didn't mean it like that. He said I was being dramatic and ruining Christmas for everyone. I looked at him for a long moment. This man who had watched his wife tear me down for 31 years and never once intervened. This man who had funded my brother's failures while letting me struggle alone. This man who was now telling me that my reaction to being publicly humiliated was the problem. I didn't argue. I didn't explain. I just walked past him toward the front door. My mom was waiting there, her arms crossed, her expression a bizarre combination of indignation and something that might have been fear. She said that if I walked out that door, I was making a choice. She said I was showing everyone exactly who I really was. She said goodbye like it was a threat, like she expected me to crumble at the possibility of losing her approval. I stopped at the door. I looked at her. I looked at Brandon standing behind her with that permanent smirk. I looked at my dad who was already shaking his head like I was the disappointment. I looked at the family members gathered in the living room, watching this unfold like it was reality television. And I said nothing, because some things don't need words. They need action. I opened the door, walked out, got in my rental car, and drove to the airport. I changed my flight to the next available departure. And by 11 p.m. on Christmas night, I was 30,000 feet in the air, heading back to Arizona. My phone was blowing up the entire time. Texts from my mom ranging from anger to guilt-tripping to fake concern. Messages from my dad telling me to stop being childish. A single text from Brandon that just said, "Nice tantrum, bro." I read every single one. Then I turned my phone off and ordered a ginger ale from the flight attendant. For the first time in my life, I felt free. The weeks after Christmas were interesting. I went back to work. I focused on my job. I hit the gym harder than I had in years. I reconnected with friends I had been neglecting. I did all the things that people say you're supposed to do when you're working through something difficult. But I didn't reach out to my family, not once. My mom's messages evolved over those first few weeks. The initial anger gave way to guilt trips. The guilt trips gave way to passive-aggressive comments about how she hoped I was happy destroying the family. Then those gave way to silence for about a week. Then the silence gave way to tentative olive branches that weren't really olive branches at all. Messages asking if I was okay, but carrying the subtext that I should apologize for overreacting. My dad texted me exactly twice. Once to tell me that my mom was really upset and I should call her. Once to say that he hoped I knew what I was doing by cutting off my family. Both messages made it clear that he saw me as the problem, that my reaction to being publicly humiliated was somehow worse than the humiliation itself. Brandon didn't reach out at all after that initial text, which honestly tracked. Why would he? His position in the family hierarchy remained secure. If anything, my absence probably made him feel more validated. I didn't respond to any of them, not because I was being petty or playing games, but because I genuinely had nothing to say. What was there to discuss? My mother called me trash in front of 18 people and expected me to laugh. My father told me I was overreacting. My brother smirked like he had won some competition I didn't even know we were playing. These weren't people who misunderstood me. These were people who understood exactly who I was and chose to diminish me anyway. The silence stretched into January, then February. By March, I had gone 3 months without speaking to any member of my immediate family. It was the longest I had ever gone, and honestly, it was the most peaceful I had felt in years. I spent those months rediscovering who I was outside of my family's shadow. Turns out, I actually liked myself when I wasn't constantly being compared to Brandon, or made to feel like an outsider in my own family. I picked up hobbies I had abandoned years ago, started reading for pleasure again, took up hiking because Arizona has some incredible trails, and I finally had the mental energy to enjoy them. I even started cooking more, something I had always wanted to do but never had time for, when every ounce of my energy was going toward work and managing family stress. The peace was transformative. I slept better. I laughed more. I stopped having that constant knot in my stomach that I had carried around for so long I forgot what it felt like to not have it. I realized how much of my life had been spent in survival mode, always bracing for the next criticism, the next comparison, the next reminder that I would never measure up no matter what I accomplished. My extended family started reaching out around February. My grandmother called to check on me, and I actually answered because she had never been part of the problem. She told me she was proud of me, that she understood why I left, and that she had given my mother an earful after I walked out. Apparently, half the family thought my mom had crossed a line. The other half thought I should just get over it. Family dynamics are fun like that. My Aunt Carol, the one I had sat next to at dinner, sent me a long email apologizing for not saying anything in the moment. She said she was so shocked by what my mother said that she froze. She said she had always seen how differently I was treated and regretted never speaking up. It meant something to hear that, to know that at least some people had noticed. But the people who actually needed to reach out, my mom, my dad, Brandon, radio silence that actually meant something. Not the silence of reflection or remorse. The silence of waiting for me to blink first. Waiting for me to cave and come crawling back like I always had before. Work continued to go well. Actually, it went better than well. Without the emotional drain of managing my family's dysfunction, I had more energy to focus, more clarity, more drive. I got promoted again in April to vice president of our regional division. I was 31 years old running a team of 40 people, managing portfolios worth hundreds of millions. I bought a house in May. Nothing crazy, but nice. 3 bedrooms, a pool, in a good neighborhood with actual community. I adopted a dog from the shelter, a 2-year-old German Shepherd mix named Duke, who became my best friend almost overnight. I started dating someone I met through a mutual friend. Her name was Rebecca, and she was an architect who had no patience for family drama because she had cut off her own toxic parents years ago. We understood each other in ways that felt rare. Life, for lack of a better word, was good. Actually good. Not the performative good I used to present to family members who didn't care anyway. Genuinely, authentically good. And then June happened. I found out through my grandmother that Brandon's MLM had imploded. Shocking, I know. Turned out the business opportunity was actually a predatory scheme that collapsed when federal regulators got involved. Brandon had not only lost all the money he invested, but had also convinced several family friends to join, resulting in multiple people threatening legal action against him. But that wasn't the best part. Brandon had apparently been living way beyond his means for months, expecting the MLM money to eventually start flowing. Credit cards maxed out, rent unpaid, loans taken out against basically anything he could leverage. When everything collapsed, he was left with nothing. Less than nothing. He was in debt to the tune of about $60,000, with no real job prospects and a reputation in our hometown as the guy who scammed people into a pyramid scheme. My parents, who had been funding his lifestyle for years, were suddenly faced with a choice: bail him out again and drain what was left of their retirement savings, or let him face the consequences of his own decisions for the first time in his life. They tried to bail him out. Of course they did, but the hole was too deep this time. They paid off some of the more threatening creditors, covered his rent for a few months, and then hit a wall. My dad was forced to come out of retirement and take a part-time job at a hardware store. My mom started doing bookkeeping work from home for local businesses. At their ages, they were grinding just to keep Brandon afloat. Meanwhile, Brandon moved back into their house because he couldn't afford to live on his own. The golden child, nearly 30 years old, was back in his childhood bedroom with his parents working to support his failures. I heard all of this secondhand. From my grandmother, from Aunt Carol, from the family grapevine that somehow kept me in the loop even though I hadn't spoken to my parents in 6 months. I'm not going to pretend I didn't feel some satisfaction hearing about Brandon's downfall. I'm human. After 3 decades of watching him fail upward while I clawed for every inch, there was a certain poetic justice to seeing reality finally catch up with him. But I also didn't feel the need to gloat. I didn't reach out to say I told you so. I didn't insert myself into their crisis. I just continued living my life, building my career, spending time with Rebecca and Duke, enjoying the peace I had fought so hard to find. Then the messages started. My mom reached out first, not with an apology, not with any acknowledgement of what she had said at Christmas, but with a request. She wanted to know if I could help them out financially, just temporarily, just until they got back on their feet. She said family helps family. She said she knew things had been difficult between us, but surely I wouldn't abandon them when they needed me most. The audacity was almost impressive. This woman had called me trash 6 months ago, had never apologized, had never acknowledged that she did anything wrong, and now she was asking me for money because her golden child's failures had finally caught up with everyone. I didn't respond. A week later, my dad reached out with essentially the same request, wrapped in slightly different language. He talked about how hard things had been, how they never expected to be in this situation, how family was supposed to stick together through thick and thin. He mentioned my success several times, emphasizing how proud they were of what I had accomplished. Funny how that pride only showed up when they needed something from me. I didn't respond to that either. Then Brandon reached out. That one actually surprised me. His message was shorter than our parents' attempts, less pleading, more entitled. He said he knew we had our differences, but that I was still his brother. He said he was going through a rough patch and could use some support. He said he would pay me back once he got back on his feet. He even threw in a comment about how I had always been the smart one, and he was just trying to learn from my success. I read that message 3 times, looking for any hint of genuine remorse, any acknowledgement of the years of mistreatment, any sign that he understood why I had walked away. There was nothing. Just a golden child expecting the universe to provide for him once again, this time through the brother he had spent 30 years looking down on. I didn't respond to that one either. By August, the radio silence from my end was driving my family crazy. I know this because my grandmother told me, and because the messages had evolved from requests to demands to outright guilt trips. My mom sent me a message calling me selfish, saying she couldn't believe she raised someone so heartless, saying I was abandoning my family in their time of need when they had always been there for me. That last part almost made me laugh out loud. Always been there for me? In what alternate reality? My dad tried a different approach. He sent me a long message about how he was disappointed in the man I had become, how success had changed me, how he remembered when I was a little boy who cared about family above everything else. He said he hoped I would find my way back to who I really was before it was too late. Brandon's messages got more aggressive. He called me a sellout, said I thought I was better than everyone, said I had always been jealous of him, and this was my way of finally getting revenge. The projection was almost too perfect. Through it all, I maintained my silence. Not because I was playing a game, not because I was trying to manipulate anyone, but because I had genuinely moved on. Their chaos wasn't my responsibility. Their financial problems weren't my concern. Their emotional needs weren't mine to manage. Then my mom showed up at my house. I don't know how she got my address. Probably from one of the extended family members who I had trusted to respect my boundaries. I came home from work on a Tuesday evening to find her sitting on my front porch, looking older and more tired than I remembered. Duke was going nuts inside, and I took a moment to compose myself before approaching. This was the first time I had seen her face to face since Christmas. Nearly 8 months of silence, and here she was, uninvited, on my doorstep. She stood up when she saw me coming. There were tears in her eyes. She started talking before I even reached the porch, words tumbling out about how sorry she was, how she didn't mean what she said at Christmas, how she was just stressed and took it out on me, how she had always loved me even if she didn't show it right. I let her talk. I stood there on my own walkway, keys in hand, and let her get it all out. The apologies, the excuses, the justifications, the tears, the pleas. She talked about how hard things had been since I left, how my absence had created a hole in the family, how she lay awake at night wondering where she went wrong, how she never realized how much her words could hurt until she saw me walk out that door on Christmas. It was a masterful performance, honestly. If I hadn't lived through 31 years of her behavior, I might have believed it. But I knew my mother. I knew how she operated. And I knew that tears from her usually preceded a request for something. When she finally stopped, I asked her one question. I asked her why she was really here. The tears stopped almost immediately. Her expression shifted. And there it was. The real reason. They needed money. Brandon's situation had gotten worse. There were legal issues now. Potential lawsuits from people he had recruited into the MLM. They were facing financial ruin. and they needed my help to prevent it. I nodded slowly. I told her I understood. I told her I appreciated her coming all this way. Then I told her no. Not angrily, not vindictively, just honestly. I said I wasn't going to bail out Brandon or fund a lifestyle they couldn't afford. I said if they needed financial advice, I could recommend some professionals who might help them restructure their debts. But I wasn't going to write a check to make their problems disappear. She tried arguing, pleading, guilting. She brought up everything she could think of. How she carried me for 9 months. How she sacrificed for me when I was young. How family was supposed to mean something. I asked her what family meant when she called me trash in front of everyone. What family meant when she spent 30 years favoring Brandon, while I had to earn everything on my own. What family meant when she never once acknowledged my accomplishments, unless she needed something from me. She didn't have answers. Just more tears. More deflection. More attempts to make me feel guilty for having boundaries. I told her she was welcome to stay at a hotel in town if she needed rest before traveling back. I offered to pay for one night as a courtesy. But I made it clear she wasn't staying at my house and that no amount of showing up uninvited was going to change my decision. She left without taking me up on the hotel offer. I watched her rental car disappear down my street, and I felt nothing. No guilt, no sadness, no second guessing. Just the calm certainty that I had made the right choice. The months that followed my mom's visit were interesting. The family divide became permanent. Those who supported my decision maintained their relationships with me. Those who thought I was being cruel gradually stopped reaching out. And honestly, both outcomes were fine with me. My parents continued struggling. They sold their house and moved into a smaller apartment. My dad's part-time job became full-time. My mom's bookkeeping work expanded. They were, for the first time in their lives, facing actual financial consequences. Brandon bounced around for a while, couch surfing with friends. Brief stints at various jobs. Ashley had dumped him sometime around July when it became clear his business opportunity was actually a financial disaster. Last I heard, he was working at a warehouse somewhere, finally earning his own money for what might have been the first time ever. Did I feel bad for them? In some abstract way, maybe. They were still my family biologically. I didn't wish them genuine suffering, but I also wasn't willing to sacrifice my own well-being to rescue them from consequences of their own making. Rebecca and I got engaged in November. Duke was the ring bearer at our engagement party, which was exactly as adorable as it sounds. We bought a bigger house together, started talking about kids, built a life that felt genuinely fulfilling in ways I had never experienced growing up. The engagement party was perfect. Just 30 people who actually cared about us. Friends from work, Rebecca's family who welcomed me like their own son, a few of my cousins who had reached out after Christmas. No drama, no hidden agendas, no one trying to diminish anyone else. Just genuine celebration of two people who found each other. Rebecca's parents flew in from Oregon for the occasion. Her dad pulled me aside at one point and told me he was glad his daughter found someone who understood the importance of boundaries. He knew about my situation because Rebecca had told them, and instead of judging me for cutting off family, they respected me for it. It was the first time I had experienced what supportive in-laws could feel like. The contrast with my own family was stark. We spent that winter planning our future, not just the wedding, but everything, where we wanted to live long-term, how many kids we might want, what kind of life we wanted to build. These conversations felt easy with Rebecca because neither of us carried the baggage of trying to please people who would never be satisfied. We were building something new, something ours, something that wasn't weighed down by generational dysfunction. My grandmother passed away in February of the following year, peacefully, in her sleep, at 83 years old. I flew back to Ohio for the funeral. It was the first time I had seen my parents and Brandon in over a year. The funeral was awkward, as expected. My mom tried to hug me like nothing had happened. I accepted the hug briefly and stepped back. My dad nodded at me from across the room. Brandon avoided eye contact entirely. We were strangers who happened to share DNA, and everyone in that funeral home could feel it. After the service, my mom pulled me aside. She looked genuinely older, more tired, more defeated. She said she had been thinking a lot about everything. She said she understood why I had pulled away. She said she wished things had been different. It wasn't quite an apology, but it was closer than anything I had gotten before. I told her I appreciated that. I told her I hoped they were doing okay. I told her that I didn't hate her or Dad or Brandon. I just couldn't be part of a family that didn't respect me. She cried. Real tears this time, not the manipulative kind from her visit to Arizona. She asked if there was any way we could start over, any way we could rebuild what had been broken. I thought about it, really thought about it. This wasn't a snap judgment. This was a moment I had imagined 1,000 times since walking out that Christmas night. I told her that rebuilding would require acknowledgement, real acknowledgement of the favoritism, real acknowledgement of the damage it caused, real acknowledgement that I had been treated as less than my entire life, not just words designed to get me to write a check, actual understanding of the harm that had been done. I told her that if she and Dad ever wanted to do the work of genuinely rebuilding our relationship, I would be open to it. But that work had to come from them. I wasn't going to coach them through it, or accept half measures, or pretend everything was fine for the sake of family harmony. She nodded, said she understood, said she would talk to my dad about it. That was 14 months ago. I got a letter from my mom last month, an actual handwritten letter, which she used to do when I was at college before the relationship deteriorated. It was 6 pages long. She went through specific memories from my childhood, the time they forgot my 15th birthday because Brandon had a soccer tournament, the time they skipped my college graduation ceremony because Brandon was sick with a cold, the way they always introduced Brandon first at family events, always talked about him more, always made me feel invisible. She acknowledged all of it, every single instance I had mentioned at the funeral, and a dozen more I had forgotten about. My dad added a page at the end, shorter, more practical, but he admitted he failed me by never standing up when he should have. There was no request for money anywhere in that letter. No ask for anything. Just 2 people finally owning 30 years of mistakes. I called my mom the next day. First time in nearly 2 years. We talked for almost 3 hours. She cried. I didn't. I told her exactly what those years felt like. She listened without making excuses. That was new. 2 weeks later, they flew out to Arizona. I picked them up at the airport. My mom hugged me and didn't let go for a solid minute. My dad shook my hand, then pulled me into a hug too. First time he had done that since I was maybe 12 years old. They stayed for 5 days. Met Rebecca properly. Fell in love with Duke immediately. My dad spent an entire afternoon throwing a tennis ball in the backyard, while Duke ran himself ragged. My mom helped Rebecca pick out paint colors for the nursery. Normal family stuff. The kind of stuff I never thought I would have with them. On their last night, we sat on the back patio after dinner. My dad cleared his throat and said he had something to tell me. He said they had officially cut Brandon off. Completely. No more money, no more bailouts, no more covering his rent or his mistakes. He said they should have done it 20 years ago, but they were too scared he couldn't handle it. He said watching me walk away that Christmas made them realize they had been protecting the wrong son. My mom added that Brandon hadn't taken it well. He called them every name in the book, accused them of choosing me over him, threatened to never speak to them again. They let him. They said if he wanted to come back into their lives, he would have to do it on his terms as an adult, without expecting handouts. Last I heard, Brandon was still working at that warehouse, still living with some friend in a cramped apartment, still bitter, still blaming everyone but himself. Ashley dumped him 8 months ago when the money ran out. He tried reaching out to me once, about 3 months back, asked if I could loan him $5,000 to start a new business venture. I didn't respond. Rebecca and I got married in April. Small ceremony. 50 people. My parents were there, sitting in the front row. My mom cried through the whole thing. My dad walked up to me afterward and told me he was proud of me. First time he ever said those words to my face. Duke was the ring bearer. Custom tuxedo. Stole the show. Rebecca still has about 200 photos of him on her phone from that day alone. If you enjoyed this video, please hit that subscribe button. It really helps the channel and help us bring you more and better stories. Thanks.